Hey y'all, welcome to Geek Freaks. I am Frank. Today I'm joined by Lucas from WNDRSOUL. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Of course, we're happy to have you on. Before we get started, can you explain your podcast? And you're also a streamer. Can you explain what you play there? Kind of give us a breakdown of the WNDRSOUL brand.
Yeah, man, for sure. So Wonder Soul as a podcast has a variety of topics and usually just deals with different passions and interests. Lately, I've been having different guests on and actually been doing the podcast live on Twitch. And Twitch, just like the podcast, is pretty much filled with variety. So lately, been playing some retro games, been playing some NCAA football, and some Pokemon Fire Red, just some different things. But yeah, so we get into a lot of different topics, but definitely video games is at the heart of that. Anime, uh, just pop culture in general, and some at times relatable life topics and conversations, man.
Guys, make sure you swing over, especially that stream. I really enjoy how a lot of times when I hop over on your stream, I'm not even paying attention to the game because it's just these conversations that are going on that are really nice. We joke around about it over here that it's second monitor entertainment. So you're like doing something, but you got WNDRSOUL on the side there and you're listening to what's going on. It's a good
Well,
listen.
that's good. I appreciate that, man.
Of
Thank
course,
you.
of course. Today we're going to be covering top 5 retro replays. So these are old school games that are fun to come back to and listen to again or play again. And it's hard because in my list I tried to make sure to not use any games that are constantly being updated or have expansions or anything like that. Because uh, a game like World of Warcraft came out in 2004. I played today, and it's because it's been constantly updated. Minecraft as well. It's 2009. Again, still played today. Is there any games like that that you have on your list, or that you are still playing that's been updated the whole time?
Oh yeah. And when it comes to like those kind of games, there's just like a handful now because it seems like the way of gaming is flood players with content, uh, allow gamers to play these games for as long as possible. You got DLC, expansions, online. So it's actually really rare that you come across a game that you don't have some kind of replay value, whether it's through online multiplayer type stuff, either with friends or just through esports type genres. And
Yeah.
so like right now I'm not really playing, I think, anything that would be in that category, but there are so many games. Like, I know a lot of people have been enjoying GTA for years, especially with the online. You'll hear people talk about the other Grand Theft Autos. Um, if it's got a really good story, you got things like The Witcher. You know, um, I would even throw Breath of the Wild in there. I feel like there's a lot of games right now that in the future, if you were to do this episode, that there's going to be more games that we are currently playing or that have been released recently that would be in that list. Back then, though, there's like there's a handful of requirements that I feel like really allowed them to stand the test of time and always give you that itch to go back and play them again. So
Yeah.
what about you, man?
Yeah. That's a good way to bring it up. Is the requirements to bring you back and something that like reminds you. A couple to me that really stand out is gameplay loop. Is it something that you can repeat often? The other thing is soundtrack. Some of these games, actually, all the games on my list, have a soundtrack that as soon as I hear it, it just takes me right back to as a kid in my bedroom with my Game Boy or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Uh, that when you return to, it sinks you right back into your childhood, and that's why you want to go back and play it again. Um, is there any like soundtracks you can think of from old games that really strike you?
Oh man, how much time do you got?
Right?
I mean that I think like when we're thinking about like older games and that complete package, standard. Like once a game was released, it was out there. There were no bug fixes, updates, any
Mhm.
changes. So you grew really attached to the music, the looks, the game modes, the story, everything about that game, because that was all that there was, until they made a sequel. So as far as soundtrack, man, it really comes down to just classic sound effects. Like there's a lot of retro type games that when you hear like in Mario or Sonic or things like that, where
Yeah.
when you hear certain sound effects and certain soundtracks, you're just like, dude, yes, this is my childhood. You can recognize it no matter where you hear it from. So yeah, but soundtracks, man, that's there. I would throw in a lot of like classic Nintendo, a lot of RPGs over time
Hmm.
because it's those games that you spend a lot of time in. Um, there's even oh, dude, if we're gonna go into soundtracks, if you want to consider this, sports games, I feel like have had over the years some amazing soundtracks. And by sports, I throw in things like, Need for Speed, Burnout. I
Yeah.
even
Burnout. Yeah.
play, dude, sometimes you will play a game like Burnout, and there's going to be artists and songs on there that you would have never discovered. It wasn't like it is today with Spotify, YouTube, and stuff like that. You'll discover your next favorite band or artist just by playing a game, and they'll stick with you, like Tony
Yeah.
Hawk Pro Skater, right? Like there's just some games that like that was almost like part of the package, was that they were going to have an amazing soundtrack. And yeah, there's a ton of games that have just really nice, beautiful, unique OSTs, like original soundtracks. But the ones that really stand out to me are those sports games like the Madden, the NBA 2Ks, and the Need for a lot of the EA games like in the early 2000s really stand out to me. But what about you?
Yeah. You had a really good point with the Tony Hawk one. Matter of fact, they announced that they're bringing out the remaster of Pro Skater 1 and 2. I'm
Oh
excited for
man,
those.
can't wait.
And so one day they announced it. The next day on Spotify, they released the soundtrack for both games
No, they
or
didn't.
combined game. Yeah, and it's like maybe 5 bands that weren't in the original games are coming back. And so like the first song, as soon as it goes off, I'm just like, oh yeah, I know where I'm at. I'm playing on graffiti. I'm skating on the top of that helicopter. I mean, it's just it sinks right in.
It's
Um,
iconic, man. It
yeah,
sticks
it's
with
really
you.
good. And then I was just watching a documentary on it's weird, but on Super Mario Brothers 3, and there was one guy that did the soundtrack for that and for the original Mario Brothers and everything. And to watch him work, it was just like two little computers and a synthesizer, and to think that that guy created some of the most iconic music in the game, and then of course the coin sounds and stuff like that, that all came from him, and just to see that little setup, and it's like the Mario music is, I mean, every country has to be familiar with that music.
Oh, dude, I wouldn't doubt, man. And you know what? Like, I think you brought up a really cool point, man. Like, especially early on, to see what they were working with, to
Yeah,
be able to develop and create like iconic sounds and themes. Like these are the themes. Like when you mention certain characters like Mario, you don't just see that character. You hear those levels as you're
yeah,
sitting there playing them on your couch Saturday morning or whenever. And it definitely it provided the atmosphere and the mood for these games, whether it was an intense action moment or just
yeah,
like a really, like a lot of like the Final Fantasy games have a really soothing soundtrack a lot of the times, especially in games where you're doing a lot of traveling and stuff
mhm,
like that. So yeah, excellent mood setters, and just the fact that they did a lot of that with like the technology that they had then, and the fact that they even went out of their way to make sure that that was, to that high standard, it's really mind blowing now, given that what you say, this dude had a couple computers, couple things like, and basically crafted out of probably a handful of actual sounds that he could use.
right, yeah,
It's just crazy, man.
yeah.
Crazy.
I think at some point you may have to get back together and do top 5 soundtracks.
Oh, please let me
Yeah.
know.
Okay, let's go ahead and get into this one then. We're gonna go top 5 retro replays. I'll kick us off. So my first one is going to be Advance Wars for the Game Boy Advance. Are you familiar with that game at all?
Ooh, man, that's a really good pick, man. Yes, I am definitely familiar with Advanced Wars. I completely forgot about that for this list. Go on, man. Go
Yeah,
on.
came out in 2001, and then it had a sequel on GBA as well, and then one on DS. It was as close to an RTS as you could expect out of the Game Boy Advance, and it had different factions that felt very unique. And this is one of the best examples of a soundtrack bringing you right back because I could hear it in my head right now as I talk about it. But yeah, it had these different countries, and each country had a couple different generals, and each general had different play styles. So like, this guy was really good with fighter jets, and this one was good for ships and whatever. And yeah, it was just a RTS where you're all at war, but it created these characters and this kind of like light story and stuff like that. To where when the sequel came out, and then there was this big bad that all the armies were teaming up for, it actually felt like a true sequel. Like, oh, we are stepping up to the next level. The Avengers are uniting, kind of thing like that. And so this game, I play it again. I play it often nowadays. Wargroove is the closest thing on Switch if you guys want to give it a try. Wargroove kind of basically mimicked this entire game. But you guys can get out there and play different versions of this game still. It's really a lot of fun. The one problem I will tell you guys if you're going to go out and check it out is it forces you to do the tutorial, which, once you've already played it once, you're like, okay, I've done all this. But this game you can sink hours into onto one match sometimes, and it has a really cool feature where you're able to pass the Game Boy back and forward. So you could do your turn, pass to your friend, they could do their turn. It's like chess on steroids. That's one of the big things that kind of got us into it, me and all my friends. But every so often I'll go back to it and I'll just play a couple maps, and it's, man, it's that music. It's watching the little sprites move up and down. Uh, it's a classic game. So that's my number five right there.
Yo, bravo. Way to kick off the list, man. I would say that I kind of made like honorable mentions in case like,
I did too. Yeah.
yeah. So one of mine would have been Fire Emblem, which is kind of like to
Nice.
me like the medieval fantasy type of Advanced Wars. But yo, those are do you know why they don't make those anymore? Like when was the last
I
time we
don't
did have
know.
an Advanced Wars?
I'm not.
Feels like
I'm
a
not
long
sure
time.
that. I'm surprised it's not a Smash Brothers character too. I'm like,
Oh my gosh,
you could
dude.
have Andy from Smash Brothers like come in and like he does repairing or whatever, and he could like sit there and repair like everybody's health or some stuff or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just
That's
seems like
yo.
such a good opportunity. My next one as well is like, why is Nintendo not making more of this?
I
But
mean, really,
yeah,
guys, we need to get a campaign out there. We need Advance Wars back on the Switch, whether it's remaster or a complete new game. That would be fantastic, man.
if they could straight up port the original, I would be very happy.
Oh, dude,
I'd be
please,
cool with that.
please,
It's
Nintendo.
like super small too.
Well, dude, I do have something similar to that on this list, but for my number five, um, which is going to be interesting because honestly, when I put this on my list, I have to be honest, I haven't fully completed it, but man, if this says anything, it's a game that you'll pick up, you'll play. If you put it down, you feel like you have to go back and play it. Then you'll be like, oh man, I forgot what I was doing. Okay, start over. Okay, start over. And you might do this, repeat this cycle. And this is more of a series, but if I had to pick a retro, type, it was going to be Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Uh,
Almost on my list.
Almost? Oh, man,
Yes.
yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people are really familiar with Skyrim and just Elder Scrolls in general. I know ESO is pretty popular,
Mhm.
um, but I was actually streaming Oblivion not too long ago and was really, for the first time, really getting, into it, like, really deep into it. But as a series, Elder Scrolls, I feel like, does what a lot of people hope and pray from an RPG. So hear me out. It's got a great story. The world is fun to explore. I think that when you have replay value, one of the things that you have to mention is, especially open world type
Mhm.
games, like that world has to be either beautiful to look at, um, have characters and feel alive, and have these certain quests and things that make you want to journey out there and uncover all the mysteries and just really check it all out. So, playing Oblivion recently, allowed me to like compare it to Skyrim. But I know a lot of people kind of kind of laugh at Oblivion now about certain things. Like it can be a little buggy. There's some character animations and things like that are kind of laughable, but it's all for fun. But for that time, this game came out in 2006. I think it was one of the first real examples of freedom as an RPG. Like the
Yeah.
freedom to create and customize your character. You can go through this game as this class, this race, and you can role play, like get into the role play aspect of an RPG and be a certain kind of character. Maybe you're a good, nice, heroic character. Maybe you're a thief. It just allowed you to play it at your own pace, however you wanted to. And I know Skyrim is fun. It's been remastered. It's actually like available on the Switch and pretty much any recent platform or console. But I really hope that people go back and don't, overlook Oblivion just because it's a little bit older. I think for the time it still holds up and it has a lot that people I feel would enjoy, especially when it comes to the freedom, the story, the quests, the characters, and just the world in general. It's very beautiful to explore. So that's my number five.
Dude, you nailed it right on the head, man. That is such a fantastic game. Voice acting's top notch, story's excellent. It was my introduction into the big RPG world. It actually was a launch title for the Xbox 360, so that kind of like showcased the power of the 360 at the time. It's like, oh my
Mm.
god, look, this whole world is so big. Um, the expansions too. Have you played the expansions for Oblivion?
Yes. Well, I was actually getting into them because I have Oblivion now, and I was streaming it, and then I stopped. I got into some other stuff, so I have every means to continue that playthrough. But for the first time ever, I just stumbled upon the DLC. I did not even know uh, like
Yeah,
where to go or anything. I just saw like I was looking at my quest log and I was like, oh, go to this island. So I went there, and then, dude, I mean, I know it's kind of weird to say no spoilers for something that's a little bit older, but it's
yeah.
definitely so fun to go through these games like Oblivion uh, blind because it really just takes you on an adventure. And the DLC, a lot of people who have played the game, especially when I was streaming it, were coming in and saying just how fun it was and how much they enjoyed it. So I haven't got to, beat it or complete those DLCs, but I've heard a lot of good things.
Yeah, they are fantastic. There are two of them. The first one is the best one, the Shimmering Isles, though.
Oh,
The
yeah.
second one is very good, but that first one's storyline is something I haven't seen in fantasy before, and to do that is so hard to try to like reinvent fantasy, but they really nailed it. Excellent choice. One last thing on this, Sky Oblivion. Are you familiar with what Sky Oblivion is?
I don't think so. What is
All
this?
right. You got to check them out on Twitter and start looking into them. They are a group of developers that are taking Oblivion and remastering it using Skyrim's engine, and it looks insanely good.
Was say what? Are you for real?
Yes, for real. Yes, Sky Oblivion. You guys check them out. It is fantastic, dude. Like you'll see, like it's Oblivion. It's Oblivion, but just like this armor with some detail you never thought you'd see in Oblivion and stuff like that. And it's fantastic. So I've I've already kind of got funding them on Patreon. Just like, come on, guys, finish this up. Can't wait to dig back into because that's man, talk about a game I've replayed. I've actually replayed that one more than I have Skyrim. I think you're right. Oblivion's the best one.
Nice, dude. I'm gonna definitely check that out.
Yeah. All right, my number four is Kirby's Adventure for the NES. It
Ooh.
came out March 23rd in 1993, and it's one of the games that used the newer MMC3 chip. So what this was uh, the NES had a long lifespan, and the reason that happened is because about halfway through its lifespan, they decided. Well, first off, they did it twice. The first time they made these like discs that you could plug into the side of your NES. It was like this external drive because they needed to be able to fit bigger games. That was okay, but kind of flopped, and it was basically just in Japan. And then they decided, like, oh, we know how to upgrade the actual cartridge themselves. They became cheaper to make, and they added this MMC3 chip that made it to where they can do better graphics and like that. That's why, like, if you look at like Mario 1 and 2 compared to Mario 3, Mario 3 is so much better. Well, this was one of the early games to use the new MM3 chip. So it was colorful, bright. It had mini games. It had an overworld to where, like, an overworld, for example, is you're in this area where you choose what level you go to. You go through that level, and then you can come back to the overworld. That kind of thing could be done on the first cartridges. Uh, it was very fast paced. Again, it had the mini games and stuff like that. So it was this huge game that mostly went unnoticed. And it's funny because I think it's something that could be taken and used today very quickly. I feel like it's, if you're familiar with Ori and the Blind Forest or those kind of games. Are you
Oh
familiar
yeah.
with that one?
Oh yeah.
It's like that. Those fast-paced platformers. It's tailor made for that. You would take abilities and then you could like combine well, this one you could have combined abilities, but later one you can. And it was just an excellent platformer, and the speed was so important because they actually made the sequels they made for this game. They slowed the game down a lot, and then into today where Kirby's doesn't even it's not even recognizable. But the original version of the game, you had to kind of go quick because Kirby wasn't as floaty. Like I know it's crazy to think Kirby not floaty, but the floaty thing was just an extra ability. It wasn't like hinging on him. So his actual jump was quick and you're like trying to slide through obstacles and stuff like that. I think that Nintendo needs to take Kirby and make him their platformer, their indie game kind of guy. So your Ori's like Microsoft has Ori. Do the exact same thing. Use Kirby for it. I'd be a big fan. It really showed off what the power of the NES was at the time as well. So that, and again, soundtrack, really good soundtrack. But that's my number 4 there.
Yo, nice. Dude, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna be honest, and I hope nobody throws tomatoes at me, okay? But I haven't ever really gotten into a Kirby standalone game. Now, if you want to play me on Smash, I'm a Kirby main, okay? Like
Dude, yeah.
I've always enjoyed Kirby in Smash because the guy is so hard to kill sometimes, you know. He has that,
Hmm.
like you said, he's so floaty. Um, but dude, that sounds really cool. And I was gonna ask you real quick, like, do you think that Kirby gets the same kind of respect and love as some of the other main Nintendo franchises? And I think that that whole idea of going in an indie direction is perfect, man. So
Especially
hopefully
for the
Nintendo picks it
Switch.
up for
The Switch is
sure.
tailor made for indies. Indies are flying off the shelves, and it's like you guys are leaving money on the table there, Nintendo. You guys have a system people are going to because of the indies, and yet you're not making any of them. Like
Right?
you're Nintendo.
Come on
uh,
now.
I can't suggest it enough. If you have the NES, and if you have, I want to say it's on that Nintendo package thing. I think you can play it on that. Actually, I'm pretty sure it is. It was a launch one for that.
Oh,
Where you pay that $20 a month. It's totally worth a try.
yo,
Pretty good.
definitely will do that, man. Well, my number 4 is from a galaxy far, far away.
Uh oh.
Um, yes, Star Wars Battlefront 2, 2005. Okay.
Nice.
Yes. So yes, we know EA has made some recent Star Wars Battlefront games, and
Mhm.
yes, we know that they go by the same name, but don't get it confused, guys. This is the Star Wars Battlefront 2. When this came out in 2005, so early 2000s Star Wars. Where are we at? I think prequels are coming out.
Yeah.
I'm a early preteen. I'm really into Star Wars at this moment, and you get these games like, first of all, the first Battlefront was crazy cool, but
Yeah.
Battlefront 2, um, why does it stand out? Look, Galactic Conquest. That's where the replay comes into
Hmm.
the just playing. I think this one was able to play online,
Yeah, it
but
was.
Galactic Conquest gave you this really nice strategy board game type vibe where you would be able to basically conquer the galaxy either as the rebels or the empire, or I guess the Galactic Republic, or the is it the Trade Federation, or at the time, like, yeah, the
Yeah.
like the droids and
If
stuff,
you're playing
right?
as a droid, yeah.
Yeah, so it was, focused on all of the, sagas at that time. So you had the prequels, and then you also had, like, the original trilogy. And I remember playing Galactic Conquest over and over again, and at first, it seems pretty easy, but the thing about it was actually a lot deeper than that. You had to manage your troops, you could buy different power-ups and perks, you had to move on the board in a very strategic and wise way. And just the gameplay in itself. So when you're actually doing the battles in Battlefront, it was awesome, man. I mean, this
Mhm.
is like on a scale at that time where this is Star Wars. Not only that, you had heroes. So um, each saga had its own select heroes, but you could run on the battlefield as a Jedi, as a Sith, with your lightsaber, or even I think Jango Fett, some other type characters, mercenaries, Han Solo, But it was just so much fun, man. And I think I never really played it online. I played it with friends. I also definitely played against the computer a lot, and
Yeah.
it was just so much fun. That was like Star Wars on a scale that I hadn't seen before, and it wasn't really linear. It was like just grand scale Star Wars battles, and I was craving something like that, and it fully delivered. So it's available on Steam. I know that, and if you haven't, please check that out. I wasn't a huge fan of the most recent Battlefronts by EA. Dude, they look amazing, no lie. But what we're talking about here with replay value is fun. Like
Hmm.
if I'm not having fun, it doesn't matter what it looks like. So with Star Wars Battlefront 2, if you are a fan of Star Wars and you haven't had the ability, the time, or didn't even know about this, please check out Star Wars Battlefront 2, and you're gonna have a ball. So that's my number 4.
It's so cheap on Steam too, guys. It's like $4 sometimes. Uh, totally worth playing. Now, okay, so that game, I can think back to certain moments. It's one of those games where like stories are being made as you're playing it. You're like, oh man, I remember this one time where blank. Do you have any of those moments rattling around right now?
Oh man, no, not like specifically, but I can totally relate to that, man. Especially when you're playing Galactic Conquest. You
Yes, yeah.
you just kind of go into your own story. You're making your moves, and you're thinking in your head like, all right, let's take over Naboo, okay? And then you'll lose, man. But it's like its own campaign that
Hmm.
you can play over and over and over again, and have these different moments, these different failures and achievements, man, where yeah, we were doing really good, and then oh, we lost that. Yeah, dude, space battles, guys, like space battles are in this. You'll be trying to take over, let's say, Hoth, and you'll have to battle in space, and then you go down to the surface of that planet. So there's like two different sides of the combat. And yeah, dude, it's like crafting your own Star Wars story from like a battle strategic perspective. And so yeah, dude, I'm sure I had a bunch of moments where I was just like playing it out of my head, man. But
Yeah.
nothing really pops up right now. But if I ever
So
think of it, I'll
classic.
hit you up,
Yeah,
dude.
I mean, it's one of those games where it's like, oh, because it shows like 200 on 200, and then as it's dwindling down, if your side starts to lose, and then you're like the last three versus like 40 of theirs, you're like, I can do this. I just need to focus, and it's it makes these stories in your own, uh, as you're playing, the story comes to you. It's just so
Oh,
good.
yeah, and you can be like a one-man army. Like, you can
Yeah,
literally go in there and kick ass, man, as just like a regular soldier. But, so I like that. Some people go, it's a little easy." I like games that make me feel like a badass. So,
yeah.
especially in something like Star Wars, if I can run out on the battlefield and start taking over points, yeah, it's cool to have my buddies back me up, but hey, don't worry, I got this. I'm gonna get point A, B. So, yeah, dude, it's so fun.
Split screen really good on that too. It's one of those things where when you're playing with your friend, especially on the opposite sides, that's how you should do it. Then all of a sudden you happen to see Darth Maul across the battlefield, and you're like, that's Jeremy or whatever, and you go for the dive. That's a good one, man. That's classic. All right, my number three is this one was like really tough one. The Simpsons arcade.
Oh,
Now
wow.
this
Okay.
one was competing against the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade, which was basically this was the spiritual sequel to that one. So this one came out in 1991 on the arcades, and then it followed up on the Commodore 64 and MS DOS. This was from Konami, and they took the success of TMNT from '89 and basically used everything except for the assets and just made this new game. You got to play as Marge, Homer, Lisa, or Bart, and surprisingly, Lisa's the best one in my opinion. She's got the jump rope. Uh, this is a lot of fun. I think it had like maybe it has to be more than 4 maps, but all I can remember is 4 maps. I recently just beat it during a video, um, and it's just a classic arcade game. And to this day, it's one of those things where if I'm going through like there's a lot of these retro arcades kind of becoming a thing right now. If I see it, I'm just like, all right, hold on, I gotta donate some quarters to the arcade gods, and get that in there. It's a really good game, guys. Uh, and TMNT is real close with this one. I'm just giving it to Simpsons because I can remember so well the bosses. Each of the bosses fit into Springfield really well, and they had a shout out to Samurai Showdown. Samurai Showdown, I think it is. In the third world, which is really cool. They had the same sound effects, which is a Konami game. So it was just like, man, this is like this bigger world that they're building. It was really cool. And the whole time you're fighting Burns, the one argument or the one problem is by the time you get to the end, you're fighting through all these big, boss dudes. The last boss is Mr. Burns in a suit, and it's just like, this frail ass dude. Are you serious? Even the suit looked janky. I'm like, come on now. But it was a really good game. It's to me it's like quintessential arcade, except for the one I'm gonna be saying later on is also that. But yeah.
Yo, that's so awesome, man. Like when I think of Simpson video games, I think of like that time though, like arcade, Sega, Super
Yeah.
Nintendo. Like there was so many. They were pumping out Simpson games left and right, man. There was what was that Bart one? Wasn't there one that was like centered around Bart? Uh,
There was one where he's time traveling.
yes,
They had
yes,
on the NES. Yeah, and he's
yeah,
like
man.
on the Great Wall of China at one point. And
All over the place, bro. It was wacky. Those games can get
yeah,
pretty crazy, man. But yeah, like when you're talking about like TMT, uh, and just like I guess like what the side scroller beat 'em ups too as well, like something like that, like from the arcades and stuff, dude. Like Power Rangers comes to mind.
yeah,
The what was the X-Men one? Oh shoot, I'm gonna blank on the actual name, but yeah, you could pick like Cyclops, Wolverine,
yeah.
Nightcrawler, and some of them, like some of those.
I had
Uh,
that on the Genesis, I think, if I can remember
ooh,
correctly.
so fun, man.
Hmm.
Well, my number three is I tried to make this list as personal, and I also tried to pick games that I thought that, and I think we both did the same thing, that just wasn't going to be like the standard, retro replay list, I guess. But for me, number three is Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos 2002.
Nice.
I am just now getting into PC, I guess, quote unquote, gaming.
Hmm.
And there was a time my only introduction to any kind of PC gaming was Warcraft 3. Back in the early 2000s, I'd go over to my buddy's house. His dad was really into PC gaming, so he had all of the games, man. But Warcraft 3, dude, has a fantastic campaign and story mode. Uh, that alone can provide replay value. But I had the most fun just setting up different scenarios and going against the AI. And for an RTS, I think RTSs as a genre can provide this. Like every time you sit down to play this, yeah, you might do certain things in a certain order, but the outcome and the way that these events take place are more than likely going to be different each and every time. And I've always been attracted to those strategic games because there's just a this whole different kind of gameplay that, for me, growing up more as a console player, didn't really get to revel in those kind of games. Like you were mentioning earlier on your list, Advanced Wars, like those, that Fire Emblem and a handful of others, maybe, are the ones that if you had a console, you got to play and enjoy. But some of the best, and I mean the best RTSs, uh, fall on PC, and that's like Age of Empires. Man, there was even a Star Wars one, Galactic Battlegrounds, I think it was called.
Hmm.
There's a handful out there, but Warcraft 3, um, from the opening, uh, you know, video, it felt like I was watching a movie. The
Yeah.
story, the voice acting, the character designs, and the sound effects as you're playing and doing stuff and commanding your troops and stuff was just, dude, so memorable. And I was just a little upset when recently I wanted to pick up Reign of Chaos, like specifically this version of the game, and you unfortunately really can't do that
No.
anymore.
Yeah.
And so that breaks my heart a little bit, but it won't, you know, diminish the amount of great times and memories I had playing this. And I eventually did get a copy and take it and upload it to our family computer and play it as often as I could. But yeah, dude, Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos 2002. Um, from just playing the campaign alone has replay value, and definitely just doing those different setups and scenarios and playing against the AI where you can either be, free for all or team battles, or what are you going to be? Are you going to be the humans, the orcs? It was the possibilities, the combinations that provided this, like, well, let me try this. I like these troops. So definitely one of my favorite retro replays.
That story is so damn good.
I know.
Uh, when they came out with the Warcraft movie, of course, as a fanboy, I was there. But while you're watching it, the whole time you're just thinking, like, just be good enough to get some sequels so we can get Arthas involved.
Please.
And man, it's hard to explain to people who like think first off video games are just like, oh, you're just playing video games. No, man, Arthas' storyline's better than anything on AMC or HBO. Like, it's so good, and the whole time you're like rooting for him, and then you're weeping for him. And the impact of Warcraft 3 on gaming alone, it's where Dota was made, which now is the biggest esports in the world. And of course, the story was what leads into World of Warcraft. So it spawned World of Warcraft as well, the longest running MMO in the world. So it's pretty insane. It's God, that story alone, guys. I remember when I first heard about it. So my first PC game was StarCraft. So I liked my Blizzard games, but I actually hadn't played this one before. And then I had a buddy that was camping with me, and we were sitting around the campfire, and he starts telling me the story of Warcraft 3, like just as if he was telling me a novel. And we stayed up past midnight, him breaking down the siege of Lordaeron and all these different things, and I'm just like, oh shit, man, this is so great. Yeah, that is a really good choice, man. Your list, I swear, it could have been my list, to be honest with you.
Oh, nice, nice. Now, hey, can I ask you something real quick while we're on the topic?
Course.
Do you see anything like a Warcraft 4 or anything beyond World of Warcraft happening from Blizzard in any kind of near future?
If Warcraft 3 Reforged worked super well, then yes. It did not. And we're all waiting for StarCraft, the next StarCraft 3. Warcraft 4 would be a really okay, so I don't want to go too deep into it, but because I can. The next expansion of World of Warcraft is Shadowlands, and we're all going to be basically in the afterlife. There's kinds of speculations. Ian Hasekafis, the lead designer, was saying that while we're gone, technically the world is advancing at a faster rate. So when we come back, it'll be like 10 years time jump.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's going to be a really good opportunity to kind of refresh the world. The game has been out since 2004. They did refresh it once in like 2011 with Cataclysm, but that was kind of not great. So they could do it all again. That 10 years, though, people are speculating, like, if you're going to make a Warcraft 4, you put in that 10 years while we were gone. So that way your character is not necessarily involved in Warcraft. Because everybody be like, well, why can't I have my guy in there? I'm part of that world. So your guy's gone, and then it's like the events that happen back at home.
That's perfect. Please say that happens, man. I hope that happens. Keep me updated. Keep me updated on that.
Oh, you know I will. Anything Blizzard, for sure. Definitely will. Okay, so my number 2, we're returning to the arcade, guys. This game, I could go into it right now and play it. It is Capcom versus Marvel.
Ooh.
Favorite fighting game. It started off as X-Men versus Street Fighter, and then it has evolved since then. That was in '96. They keep releasing different kinds of versions. There is a version of it right now that came out in 2017 that's relatively new. But man, that classic Capcom versus Marvel, used to be able to pick, oh, I'm going to be Gambit, I'm going to be Mega Man, and it was just fantastic. I never was able to beat the game because I just didn't bring enough quarters to the arcade ever. And but then I was working at a Dish Network. You guys probably familiar with Dish Network. And I was sitting there and I had access to our shared drive, and I was like, "Oh, look, I could put emulators on the shared drive." And so everybody in Dispatch was playing Capcom versus Marvel, and I finally had a chance to beat it. That game gets thick; it's real big at the end. Um, it's a fantastic game. It was very, very, very fighting because, of course, fighting because they use the Street Fighters as a lot of the engine. So it was very tight fighting. The sprites and everything like that were reused countless times, not only in those games, but for the other X-Men games. The Wolverine's the one I'm picturing the most because they use that sprite like crazy. Because at the time this came out with the '90s X-Men cartoon,
Oh
a
yes.
classic, right? So everybody just wanted more of them, and if you're watching the '90s cartoon, then you have to get some more Wolverine. And it had the Cyclops and everything like that from the show as well. They used all the same art style from the show into this. Uh, it was a really good game, and man, it's my only fighter game. Well, I mean, Smash Brothers. It's hard to say Smash Brothers isn't on there too, but this is like when I think of like classics fighting game. This is my favorite one for sure.
Yo, that's an excellent pick. And for some reason, the fighting genre is something that I didn't even consider. But like those games hold a ton of replay value. And it
Yeah,
doesn't they age really well too. I think actually a lot of the classic fighting games are in a lot of ways gameplay wise and just mechanics and just the style and vibe of it in general, like you're talking about the sprites and just movement stuff like that is better than some modern day fighters, honestly.
yeah.
So good pick, man. Um, man, for my number two though, uh, my top two are really personal, so they I don't know how much these are going to be on anybody else's list, but for me, number two is Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow.
Oh, so happy to put
Um,
this on there.
Yeah, so I mean, technically, it would be fair to say like Fire Red and Leaf Green because they're technically the remasters. But
Yeah.
I would say that the original Pokemon, the original, um, if you grew up in the '90s, regardless of when you grew up now, honestly, because Pokemon is still huge. But these games, the original games that came out on the Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, even because that's where Fire Red and stuff came out, um, they hold such a special place in my video game fandom because even though Pokemon to a lot of people is multiple things, could be the anime, could be the trading card game, but I think for a lot of people, it was these video games. And for a kid going into this world of Pokemon, uh, catching and capturing, well, pretty much the same thing, right? But uh, catching these Pokemon, being able to nickname them, being able to customize and make your own teams, go about the world really in your own way, in your own pace. Um, Man, it's one of those games that you really can play one time, beat it, and you have these six starters, and then you go, you know what? This try it this time with only water Pokemon or only fire. So you could always find ways to switch it up and have different Pokemon. And the whole thing, especially in the originals, before to me personally, it got kind of overwhelming. Like when it was just 150 Pokemon, okay, that's I can manage that. Now God knows how many Pokemon are out there. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that just the original Pokemon from Red and Blue just had a really cool design. And they stand out more. And then obviously Yellow, you got to walk around with Pikachu. So if you're a fan of the anime, Pokemon Yellow is the way to go. Now Fire Red and Leaf Green give you this like fresh coat of paint. I think there are some gameplay mechanics that are adjusted, which is it's nicer. It's almost I would say easier to access for newer Pokemon fans or gamers.
Hmm.
But look, if you are a kid from the '90s or if you played these during their prime, they are still so much fun to play. It's a nostalgic hit like none other. Plus, I've been introduced from a lot of other streamers, content creators. This unique way of playing Pokemon, which is a Nuzlocke, which is if you want to increase the difficulty, uh, here's the way to do it. It's like these self-imposed rules. You have to nickname your Pokemon, so you know grow more attached to them. Uh, if any of your Pokemon faint, well, it's done. It's like permadeath. You got to put
Mhm.
them in the computer. So there's that level of anxiety, like when you're playing Fire Emblem or a game where you know, oh my gosh, if I lose this character, I've grown attached to this Pokemon. This is like a critical, you know, member of my team. So everything you do has just an added, you know, importance. Plus, there's you can only catch the first Pokemon on each route. And if you don't catch it, well, you're just out of luck. So I think that people, fans of the originals, and you can do this with all of them, really. But for me, Gen 1 and even 2 hold a special place in my heart. And I've always found myself in some way or another through different spans of time going, you know what? I feel like playing a Pokemon game. And for me, my favorites are always going to be red, blue, yellow. You could throw in heart, not heart gold, but yeah, heart gold, soul silver, which is you know gold and silver, Gen 2.
Yeah.
But man, they're just so much fun, and they'll bring you back to a time where wow, this was on the Game Boy, you know, and the
Mhm.
freedom. I'm telling you, one of the best things about replay value is giving the gamer, the player, freedom to customize, to explore the world at their own pace. And for a kid, there's a lot of things in Pokemon where I was like, dude, how did we figure this out? But I forget like how much of a phenomenon this was. And without the internet, you know, like it is in the 90s, you know, it was so fun to talk to friends, to trade Pokemon via link cable. So you could either
Oh yeah.
evolve them or, you know, just you wanted to either collect them all or you had your favorites and you're like, oh, you caught, you know, an Alakazam or this or that. You know, so it was in its own way a single player game or RPG, but it encouraged you. And I think we still see that today with Pokemon Go, you know, and where it's at now as a franchise. It's always encouraged players to reach out to other Pokemon trainers, dare I say, to interact,
Mhm.
to play against each other, to battle each other, and to trade. So, yeah, always gonna have a soft spot for Pokemon, and I always feel like no matter what, it's always a fun game to go back and replay. So that's my number two.
You nailed it with your number two, man. You nailed it. So it's hard to explain to the maybe the kids nowadays feel this, but I think it might be something that's more relatable to us '90s guys. Is how attached you used to get to your Pokemon,
Oh yes,
dude. If for some like it's unreal. Like I mean, I remember God, Pokemon Yellow. I would just be throwing batteries out left and right. They didn't stand a chance in my Game Boy. You know, like going to school with only 2 hours of sleep because you were playing it all night. Uh, the original ones, those cables. Oh yeah, dude, trading Pokemon back and forth. Uh, and you got really attached to them so much so that I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember No Name or No Number?
oh yeah. Like the glitched, weird, unknown type Pokemon thing at the yeah. Oh yeah, that was
Yeah,
weird.
you go surfing and you'd get this Pokemon, and if you had rare candies at a certain slot or whatever, you can multiply rare candies and then level something up. But I remember like, oh, we got to try this out because it's it's the rumor of the recess, and so you do this, but you're like, yeah, I got these rare candies, but I mean, I'm not going to use it on my Charizard. That's my baby. I'll use it on this guy, like because you were attached to the Charizard. Like
Right.
he went through hard work, he deserves it better than that. Um, yeah, what a classic. And then for the Nuzlocke, great shout out for Nuzlocke. I've been really needing to do this. I actually need to do it on an older because I don't. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, but you got to reset your Pokemon game to do it. So I got to find a game I want to do that with. If you guys want to watch a video of somebody who made a cartoon out of it, Jaden Animation, she did a her Nuzlocke and she made like an animation out of it, a little story out of it.
Oh,
It's
yes.
really good.
Super good. Man, I'm so happy you brought that up. That is perfect, dude. I when I was discovering Nuzlocke, I literally watched that and it captures like it literally captures that story and experience all in that one video. So definitely good suggestion, man.
Yeah, you guys gotta check that out. It's good. Okay, my number one. Okay, so a lot of these are personal and stuff like that, and I was like, okay, this next one is very personal. That's number one. It is very personal, but it's also like the easy number one. So I don't want to hear no hate on this one. It's Super Mario Brothers, the 1985 Super Mario Brothers.
Bro,
This guy came
classic.
out. Right. I mean, it has to be on my list. So it's September 13th in 1985, developed by Nintendo, of course, by Shigeru Miyamoto. I've always been bad at his name, and Takashi Tezuka. So these guys are basically the fathers of Nintendo at this point. It came out originally on the Famicom, then the NES over here. So, the Famicom is the NES. It was eventually released on the arcade, and then as soon as they could start doing, like on the Wii, we were able to do download retro games. Came out on the Wii and the Switch and the Wii U. Uh, this game. Oh, first off, a little side note I thought was interesting. A fact that I found out when they put out the strategy guide for this game, it was the number one best-selling book in Japan that year.
What?
That's crazy.
That's
Yes,
really
it isn't.
crazy.
There's not a lot of strategy to the original Mario Brothers. Just where's the hidden one-ups, but this game, man, I actually, it's so funny because I was like, okay, let me kind of go through my list. And I was watching that documentary I mentioned before about Mario Brothers 3. That I was like, well, let me just play it. And I actually played it this morning and I was just like, God damn, this game is good. Uh, it's fast paced, it's quick, the music's awesome. When I had my nephews and nieces over recently and I was like, come on, guys, let me show you this game. They could play Fortnite like nothing, and yet they can't handle this game. It's something that's like, it's almost like genetically ingrained in us now to where we know where to jump. We know where the one up is. I can't help but go right to level 4, then right to level 8. And, it's such a fantastic game. It's so well built that it made an empire. With Nintendo and with Mario, one of the most recognizable characters worldwide. Uh, it made gaming in a lot of ways, because we needed a mascot for the entire industry. And if we had to pick one person to represent the entire industry, it is Mario. And I'm gonna have to go with the classic 1985 Super Mario Brothers.
Dude, I mean, I can't do anything else but applaud you on that, man. I mean, that's like if you're gonna get anybody into gaming, that's definitely in that starter kit for video gaming. And
I like that starter kit.
yeah, dude, and I think that you have a really funny point though, because those games, I don't know if it was just like the way we played games back then, but yeah, dude, modern gamers I think have a harder time with certain platformers or certain styles of games that we are familiar with, because really why you got so good at that was the repetition. Like you were just
Yeah.
like you made a mistake and you had to adjust. You learned it. Okay, I got to jump earlier, or I got to go through here. There's an enemy right here. It was going through those those levels over and over and over again. So man, that in itself shouts out replay, and it was just always fun. It's one of the games that got me and so many others into video gaming. and
Yeah.
and
Same myself too. Yeah.
bro, and then to see where that, like you said, that franchise, that brand, that company has gone. I mean, no wonder people were, their minds were blown when Super Mario 64 came out, and just to see where it is today, a Mario Kart, Mario, Party, Mario everything. It's
Yeah.
wild, dude. So, excellent pick, man. And this is where I'm going to swerve off and take the exit on the interstate here, because I don't think this is, like you were saying, man, personal. This for me, and I don't know if it's recent. And if you were to ask me to make this list, later, who knows, or whatever. For me, one of my favorite games to replay, to go through, no matter what time, day, year, is NCAA football. Okay,
Wow.
so
Yeah, you're veering off pretty good right there.
I'm veering off now. I'm going to try to pitch this to why I feel like this is important. Now, I'm a sports fan.
Mhm.
I've become super familiar and into college sports, and I dig NFL, NBA, all these different uh, franchises and different sports and things like that. But here's the thing. I've noticed this recently. I was like, sports games have kind of fallen off here this generation. More recently, there was like a time where they were just popping out. Either it was EA or 2K,
Yeah.
and there was just so many types of sports games. And so here's the thing with NCAA football. One of my introductions to the sport of football, it was this video game. How I actually really learned what this sport was about and how to play it when I eventually did in high school was through playing this game, NCAA football 2006, more specifically.
Hmm.
Um, Back in the day, on the summer of 2006, playing with one of my best friends. We'd go back and forth playing. It introduced this race for the Heisman mode, which was like basically, hey, create your own character. Now go ball out. And so you almost had this create your own player RPG within this sports game. Not only did it have that, it had the dynasty modes where
Yeah.
you could either create a team and put them in there, or you could just take over your favorite team. And the thing about the college aspect of football is like the recruiting, the building the team, and trying to get players to come to your school to play for you. And there's this like we talked about this connection and attachment to Pokemon and different things. You get attached to some of these players, and
Yeah.
and so like for me, it was just it's a video game that it first of all no longer is being made. They can't make it at the moment. The last one was 2014. So yeah, we're still getting Maddens and NBA, wrestling games and baseball games. And so to me, there's that nostalgia of like, oh wow, they don't even make this anymore. There's a lot of games on this list that I have where in some way or another they continued on. They may not be direct sequels, but there's spiritual successors in a way. Like we're talking about
Right.
Warcraft. There's World of Warcraft. Pokemon Sword and Shield, the new Star Wars Battlefronts, Skyrim, and
Yeah.
ESO. So for me, this was just a special introduction to the world of college football, which where I live, and growing up has just been such a huge thing. So as much as I love catching Pokemon and fighting orcs and going on galactic conquest, and also pretending to be name it in Oblivion and Elder Scrolls and stuff like that. There's an excitement from playing these sports games that really captured the atmosphere of what it was like to be at a football game. So um, that's my number one, because I feel like when we're talking yet again about replay value, I'm having fun. There's a lot of customizations that I can implement. I can create
Hmm.
players, jersey numbers, different things like that. There's not really a story, but like we were talking about earlier, you can create the story in your head. You're the head
Exactly.
coach of this school. Oh, you got to do this. You got to do that. What are they? You almost play in your mind between each game. What are they saying on ESPN about my team? What's Stephen A. Smith talking about today? Oh, they're gonna talk a bunch of smack this week, and you kind of build yourself up and create this story. And just I think another thing about it, and really one of the last things about it, is that the other sports games, especially when we're talking about professional, I don't think they age well, because a lot of the problems people have with, like, let's say Madden, it's like, okay, you basically just do a roster update every year, and you ask
Right.
me to bring $60 and buy this new version of it with some minimal upgrades or tweaks and stuff like that, right? I can tell you from experience that NCAA was always paving the way when it came to thinking like, how can we improve this football simulation? Not only that, they weren't allowed to use player names. So you were always looking at wide receiver number two, quarterback number 12. It wasn't unless you knew at the time who was on that roster. So I think like it ages better that way. And you can actually auto name the rosters, and you can, just customize and create it. You want to be in the game, you want to be the quarterback for, USC, go ahead. Do you want to name your wide receiver, All Might, go for it. It's on you. So for that, and the size of the game, you can make a dynasty and go 20 plus years and see what the future is for that franchise and stuff. So yeah, that's my number one, man. I know it's kind of different, but for sports games, I don't know where they really are now. A lot of things are
Yeah.
are really focused on online, ultimate team, my player, a lot of microtransactions, and a lot of things like that. And it's upsetting, man, because we were talking about soundtracks earlier. all the college, band music that plays, and on 2006 NCAA football, dude, they had some of the most kick-ass music and bands like rock bands that I've ever heard, and their songs just stick out, and I would have never heard those if I had not played that game, and yeah, so that's my number one, man.
It was a good choice. Obviously, personal. Now, this is a 2K6 one, right? So it's the 2K ones.
So no, yeah, well, this is by EA, so it's
This is
yeah,
by EA. Okay.
yeah, it's NCAA football 2006, but
Yeah.
I went basically from '06 to 14, and the 14
Yeah.
was the last one, so yeah.
I mean, those are classics. I grew up playing football games and stuff like that. Generally mattered, of course, but I mean, they're just so good. They are classics. There's a lot of people who don't understand, like maybe they don't play football or something like that, or they're not familiar with it from this country or something like that. Uh, the how you're explaining that stories are being made, uh, something as simple as like, oh, I lost to a certain team. Boom, you just got a rival. You know what I'm saying? So
Yes, yes,
that's
exactly.
gonna come back. You're gonna be working your way back to fighting that team and stuff like that. Uh, it's it's classic. And then I'm not a big fan of college ball myself, but I do see the appeal, especially when you go into like how much trickier the budget is and how much you're constantly have this changing roster and stuff like that to a
Exactly.
faster degree. Um, it's a good choice. If anybody hasn't given a football game a shot, maybe you're not a big football fan, um, check them out. They're more than what you assume. They're actually, and then you can go to a GameStop. You can pick up an old Madden, like whatever, from 5 years ago for almost nothing. Because again, they changed the numbers on the jersey, so you got to make sure you get the new one.
Exactly.
Uh, and I always buy the 5 years ago. I'm like, I'm totally happy. It's perfect. Um, they're really fun. They're a blast, and there's a lot of strategy that people don't think about involved in those games. That's a good choice.
Thanks,
Good
man.
one.
Thanks, man. And just one last thing about it, it kind of mixes in the playing against your buddies, your friends.
Yes.
I did more of like handing over the controller, going against buddies, than played it, than playing against a computer. And so there's a lot of memories, like if you're a fan of fighting games, like playing against your friends, on the couch, and so there was always that. And so I have a lot of memories of epic moments and letdowns from just playing with people I know. So yeah.
Yeah. Same. I'm at with my little brothers. Oh yeah. I remember those. It would get heated. Those are great. On a side note, have you ever played the old Blitz games, NFL Blitz, like on the
Oh,
Dreamcast?
oh man, yes, dude. Yo, Blitz in general was just wacky,
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, there was like these NFL Street games that came out around that
Hmm.
PS2 era and stuff like that, and those are fun. But the Blitz was just crazy fun, very arcade like.
Yeah.
They did the Blitz League, and that was like, I don't know. They tried to kind of get realistic, and they're like almost like in a Mortal Kombat sense, where it's like, yo, this is pretty gruesome, right? But if you played like 2002, 2003 Blitz, the one that you could find in an arcade, now
Yeah.
that's a lot of fun.
That was like football but faster. It
Oh
was
yeah,
really quick and stuff like that. It was good. Great list, man. Honestly, I mean,
thank you.
I could have used it as my list to be honest with you. There's some really good choices there.
You too.
So you
You too,
guys,
man.
I appreciate it. You guys got to check out these games that we're talking about. A lot of them can be found either through stores that are selling the retro games, or you can go to classic arcades. That's one thing that we should mention is there are a lot of arcades out there that are barely staying open because it's kind of a tough business. You make a quarter at a time.
Mm.
See if you have any in your local area. Swing by, $20 in your pocket. You get a whole afternoon of fun. Support the local businesses. It's always important to do. Before we leave, can you give us another shout out where they can find your podcast, your Twitch, your Twitter, everything?
All right, yeah, most definitely. And dude, I'm so happy you brought up arcades too, because I feel like arcades need to make a comeback in general, dude. There's a lot of
Yes.
games that we miss out on, and a lot of experiences that we miss out on from the lack of arcades being local.
Hmm.
To me, arcades fall in the same category as comic book shops. Like they're just a
Exactly.
place to meet and hang out with people that have the same interests, and you'll discover new things that you're into, and new friends. So yeah, definitely, I back you 100% on that. And as far as like the podcast, man, you can check out Wondersoul every week on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and wherever you listen to podcasts. I have recently, over the last 4 to 5 weeks, started to do these podcast episodes live on the Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/Wondersoul. So we do that. Try to do those on Wednesday night, once a week. So if we're not doing the podcast on Twitch and we are live on Twitch, right now playing some NCAA, doing some of that, and also playing some Pokemon Fire Red, Nuzlocke, and some other random classics and stuff like that. Try to keep the variety going there. So you can find Wondersoul on Twitch there, and on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, like I said, and on Twitter at Wondersoul, WNDRSOUL. And that's about it, man. Thank you for having me on the show, dude. I really appreciate it. This has been a nostalgic hit like no other. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you hanging out with us too, man. And we look forward to seeing more from you. That's it for us this week, guys. We'll see you guys. Actually, on Friday, we have the Industry Inside. We're going to be taking a look at Ubisoft. We're going to get our Ubisoft episode here. So we'll see you guys throughout the week. Bye. Thank you for joining us on the Geek Freaks podcast. You can find us on Twitter at GeekFreaksPod. We're also on Facebook, Instagram. You can email us. We have our Patreon and a store. All those links are in the description. Thank you so much